There are few characters who have been depicted more often than Lucifer. He's one of the first characters in Western canon and makes appearances in all sorts of media, from high art to popular culture. This means that any new work that includes him will necessarily be in conversation with the works that have come before. This makes Lucifer distinct from most of the other Hazbin Hotel characters. Though the story is essentially Bible fan fiction, only a handful of Hazbin characters come from the Old and New Testaments. Essentially, there's Lucifer, Adam, Lilith, Eve, and then in episode 6, St. Peter appears briefly. Everyone else is a Medrano original. As with any character with a plurality of interpretations, the creatives had to choose which pieces to preserve and which to change. Continuity of character tends to be the default choice. After all, if you're adapting a character or borrowing something from them, it's presumably because you liked something about their character, their personality, or what they represent, or want to explore what they've been through. Many details of Lucifer's character can be highlighted or de-emphasized based on the story told. Even his name is interchangeable. Sometimes he's Lucifer, sometimes the devil, sometimes Satan. However, there are a few core elements that always come through. He gifted or tempted humanity with the knowledge of good and evil. He was cast out of heaven and reigns over hell. He's always popping up to play tricks on humans and taking side bets with God. This is a total side note, but the impression I get with Lucifer's relationship to God is he's like God's kid he had when he was a teenager, and they just figured out in adulthood that they'd never have a typical parent-child relationship, so they figured out their own way of being close, and it just happens to involve messing with people. I digress. It's not always the case that even that much makes it into a Lucifer. With these similarities accounted for, let's look more closely at what can change from adaptation to adaptation. Changes made to a character during the adaptation process often work in much the same way that foils do. Foils exist as character counterpoints, asking what if? What if this character made a different decision at some key point? What if they had this advantage or that hardship in life? In adapting a character and changing some part of them, you draw attention to that new trait or new experience. Here's where things get fun. Whenever possible, Medrano leans into the opportunity to subvert her audience's expectations. I mean this generally, not just in her character writing. For a couple small non-character examples to get the feeling for her style, in episode 3, Carmilla pours herself a drink only to take a swig from the decanter.
¡Ay, qué barbaridad!
You expect her to take a drink from the glass she's poured because that's how people drink liquid. But at the last second, she decided she needed a bigger drink. It's funny because it's a little absurd, but it also serves a communicative purpose in showing you just how hard a day she's had. Medrano likes this gag so much, she used it again in the very next episode.
Real whiskey. I meant the whole bottle, jackass.
This tactic of subverting expectations is used extensively to establish Lucifer's character. By playing on what people come to Hazbin Hotel already knowing about Lucifer, and through her use of misdirection, Medrano creates a Lucifer that's both true to the source material and also refreshing to watch. It's difficult for me to gauge how much the average person knows about Lucifer or how much they knew about Lucifer before watching the show. When I first watched the show, all I knew about him was what I've already said, and I was surprised by a lot of the choices Medrano made, even the most obvious ones. For example, I remember turning to my wife and saying, "It's interesting that they made Lucifer a pretty boy TM." She, who had a Christian education, was like, "Don't you know the first thing about Lucifer? He was God's favorite angel, as beautiful as the morning star. That's why his name is Morning Star." And I was like, oh my god, what? Medrano's choices about his appearance are entirely within the source material from which she was working, but they were a revelation to me. What's more, she knew this would be a revelation for a certain amount of her audience, as evidenced by the way Lucifer is introduced. Lucifer's introduction follows a similar setup and payoff structure to Carmilla's drinking gag that we've already explored. Lucifer is set up as an intimidating figure we all might expect from the devil. Charlie, his own daughter, hesitates to call him and ask for favors.
What's the holdup? You got daddy issues?
Nifty calls him
the ultimate bad boy. I bet he's scary.
When he first appears on screen, he's hunched menacingly over his work table, muttering as he finishes his creation.
That's it. Almost there.
Now, presenting!
Medrano leans into the idea that Lucifer is some manipulative, bad, evil trickster character, only to surprise the audience.
The magic-tastical, back-flipping rubber duck! Ha ha! That spits fire!
In this moment, Medrano shows us that the Lucifer of this show is unique in some key ways. One very important thing to note is that this kind of subversion of expectation isn't the same thing as randomness. While watching the show for the first time, it might feel random, but the choice to craft Lucifer in this way, like any decision in a well-crafted show, was deliberate. When a story is well told, each piece serves a communicative function. To illustrate this on a scale we all experience every day, think about how you tell stories to your friends about things that happened at work or school. You naturally gravitate towards giving all the required information in as few words as possible. When you tell them a piece of information that's surprising, like a strange thing your coworker said, it's not random that you put it into the story. You mentioned it either as setup or payoff, right? Fiction works the same way if the fiction is written well, always pushing towards and supporting the purpose of the story. To return to Lucifer, this subversion of expectation does some interesting things with regards to our understanding of him. First, it forces us to pay attention. In general, not just in media, people see what they think they see. It's part of why freedom of expression is so important. Styling yourself is a way to communicate yourself to others.
Which of these makes me look sexier?
In the same way, the showrunners style their characters to communicate things about them. This can include the way they dress or their color scheme. Let's compare someone like Rosie to someone like Angel Dust. She has dark red and black clothing, sharp teeth, and a skull motif. She is a sinister character. Angel Dust, on the other hand, is all white and light pinks and is detailed with freckles and hearts, giving him a much softer appearance. If Medrano had styled her Lucifer in the classic big red guy with horns, the Beast, that would have been, in and of itself, shorthand communication of an angry Lucifer who wants vengeance on God. I don't need any more information. I know what this guy's about. However, Medrano doesn't create this Lucifer, or rather, she does, but cloisters him into the entirely separate identity of Satan. Lucifer is a blonde adult man of diminutive stature who makes rubber ducks and gets nervous when his daughter calls him on the phone.
Daughter calling? Oh! Hello, Charlie. Hey, Char. No, that's not good.
Oh, this is the first time she's called you in years. This has to be perfect.
Hey, bitch!
That's Lucifer? Suddenly I have a million questions and need to pay close attention if I'm going to understand what his deal is. Second, and most important, Medrano doesn't waste her subversion. When you drop something unexpected into your story, your audience, if they're a curious audience, will think, I wonder where this is going. However, this response doesn't come automatically. Curiosity is a trait in an audience that must be cultivated. One does this by teaching one's audience what to expect of one's writing. When a story element is set up, there must be payoff in equal measure. For example, one can include a character detail or plot point that matches some other information provided throughout the story. This connection shows the audience that there's depth and continuity to the characters, and the more they watch or read, the more there is to understand and the more depth they'll uncover. This is an exciting and engaging way to consume media. However, not all writers manage to pull this off. If you provide an interesting tidbit but don't go anywhere with it, you teach your audience that their interest will not be rewarded. If later you drop something else weird into the story, then your audience won't have the same curious response. They now know that the things in the story that don't make sense never will, because the places that need exploration will never get any. So instead, they'll get frustrated with strange things happening for no reason. Medrano doesn't fall into this trap. Her Lucifer is a bit unorthodox from many traditional depictions, but he is revealed over the course of his episode to have a rich inner world that follows directly from the source material that inspired his character. Join me in part 2 for an exploration of his inner logic and how this worldview shapes the world building of the show.